son te llama a bailar, a gozar. Guajira, el son te llama a bailar, a gozar.
Amigo, pide otra copa, caramba, que este cantor te convida. Y aunque a ustedes no le importa, voy a hacerle la historia de mi vida. Amé mucho una mujer de mi alma, la más querida. Me traicionó la perdida, caramba, qué ingrato y mal proceder. Ella me hizo beber, ella me hizo un perdido. A la droga me tiré, amigo mío, y a la cárcel fui llevado. Los amigos me olvidaron, solo mi madre lloraba. A Dios pedía y rogaba que se salvara su hijo. Recuerden lo que les digo, que en la prisión y en la cama solo nuestra madre nos ama, caramba. No hay dinero, no hay amigos, linda Guajira, mi son te llama.
Guajira, el son te llama a bailar, a gozar. Guajira, el son te llama a bailar, a gozar. Guajira, el son te llama a bailar, a gozar. Guajira, el son te llama a bailar, a gozar. Y al piano, don Rubén González.
Greetings, greetings, hello, Aquaba, welcome. Happy Sunday or whatever day that you're watching this, happy day to you. Welcome to this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And our very critical topic today, how the Black Liberation Army executed the plan to free our sister Assata Shakur. We're going to be talking about some of the specifics that happened when Assata Shakur was freed from the enemy's prison on November 2nd, 1979. The key players in that operation are no longer physically with us. And towards the end of a number of their lives, they begin to talk about the details. So now, for those that don't know, we can talk about what actually happened. It's very important that we understand it because it wasn't a freak thing that happened. It wasn't a spontaneous thing that would happen. It was something that was planned and organized. And of course, if you know anything about us, in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we are constantly talking about the necessity for organization. This is a critical problem that we feel that we have as a people. We jump here, we jump there, we do this today, we do something totally different. Tomorrow, we do something totally different the next day. Then we don't do anything for 5 days. Then we do something totally different for the day after that. And we never have any consistency. We never have any organized processes that are sustainable. We just do individualistic things on an individual basis. And this, in our humble view, is a large part of the reason why we struggle to move forward. So we're going to talk about this operation today with the hope that you take away from this that with organization, anything is possible. And we give honor and thanks to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, the true indigenous people, not the fake marauders running around here who know about as much about Africa as I do about the process of delivering a baby and what's involved with my body in delivering a baby, because I've never done that and I never will. And these people have never studied anything about Africa and never will. And so we're not talking about those people. We're talking about the people who have legitimate ancestry in this region of the world, in the Western Hemisphere, and who represent the native tribes of the Western Hemisphere, and whose land that we have been a part of for the last 500 years because of the chattel slave system. And so for that, we thank them and we stand shoulder to shoulder with them in their struggle to get their land back. Which is exactly what they're struggling to do, whether you know it or not. That's happening. And we honor our African ancestors, the people who are the reason that we are here, the people who sacrificed so much. And like many of these ancestors in the Black Liberation Army and the allied organizations who participated in this operation to free Assata Shakur, they wanted us to understand the importance of organization, not the importance of adventurism, not the importance of just individualistic action to make us feel better about our oppression, but the importance of working with other African people and other peace and justice loving people to create capacity to win our struggle for justice and forward human progress. And so we always do our best to listen to those African ancestors, and we honor them. And we thank you for joining us today. And we start, as we always do, just simply by talking about the basis of who we are in the All African People's Revolutionary Party and what we're doing here. Our Ancestors' Voices, of course, is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party every week, same time, same place, AAPRP. And the APRP is, of course, a revolutionary, independent, Pan-African political party that is based in Africa with the objective of Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism. We are Pan-Africanists. And that means we define Pan-Africanism as the achievement of one unified socialist Africa, total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. And based on science, based on study, based on history, and engaging all three of those things, we are saying today that the solution to the problems that African people face, scattered in 120 countries, 2 billion of us all over the world, will not be solved by bourgeoisie, capitalist elections in the countries we live in. I mean, we've been doing that for centuries now, and we're still in a worse position today than we've ever been at any other point in history on a collective level. We're not talking about individuals, because individuals don't define history. The masses of people define history. So on a collective level, and you know that's true, because if it were not true, then you could just look at any individual. You could take an individual, and you could take someone like LeBron James, for example, the basketball player, and you could say, well, if individuals define history, then all of us can define our existence based on LeBron James. But of course, none of us could define our existence based upon LeBron James because, number one, we would never be able to play basketball or any other sport to the level that he does. I mean, that's just objectively true. And two, we would not, because of that, we would not have access to the type of resources he's had to become a billionaire. So for all of us to sit here and say, well, all we have to do is look at LeBron James and do what he does as individuals, that would never advance us. It would advance a handful of us, 5 or 6 of us, but it would do nothing to change the conditions for the masses of people. So this is what we're saying when we say that when we talk about Pan-Africanism, we're talking about a solution for the masses of African people all over the world. And we believe that Pan-Africanism is that solution. And we define Pan-Africanism as a united, one continental government that operates under scientific socialism. And we think that this is the solution to the problems African people face everywhere on earth, no matter where you live, no matter what language you speak, no matter what food you eat, what faith that you practice, Pan-Africanism is our solution. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which lays out the strategy where all of really revolutionary Pan-African formations who are on the ground can unite into one worldwide fighting force. And this is the work that the APRP engages in every single day, all over the world. And Our Ancestors' Voices is a weekly program, as I mentioned, sponsored each week, or hosted each week, rather, by AAPRP organizers Ajamu, which is me, and Shakura, which is my biological and ideological daughter. So to get us started on this very important topic today, how the Black Liberation Army freed Assata Shakur, I'll turn it over to Shakur.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, kind sir. Thank you. Greetings, everyone. How is everyone? We hope that you all are safe and well. So when we start talking about the Black Liberation Army, a lot of people have misinformation. They have been misinformed, if you will, where they have this notion that they believe that the Black Liberation Army, or what we may refer to as BLA, has actually been a product of creation after the government, the US government's, I should say, destruction of the Black Panther Party. And so, with the Black Panther Party being above ground, there's a lot of assumptions that BLA came out of that situation because it was a response, if you will, to what was happening with the US government taking over and destroying everything from the BPP. But the truth is not really provided. And that's particularly the issue that we have with propaganda, right? Where you are so entwined with accepting the lies, right? Like Kwame Ture talks about how that's what happens when you live under capitalism is they will teach you that the lie is the truth. And even though you know the lie is the truth, you will start to break down with accepting this lie. And you will start to convince yourself that maybe it is true. Because in your mind, in your heart of hearts, this is really not true. But by the same token, you're going up against propaganda, you're going up against media, you're going up against years and years and years of shaping and framing messages so that they can reveal to people what they need to be said, even if it's not based on integrity, even if it's not based on truth. And so even though people know in their heart of hearts what the real truth is, to be able to push against that is too much of a risk for a lot of people, because it may make you look like, you're questioning, a higher authority. It may make you look unpatriotic if that's something that you actually care about. It may make you look like, you're resisting and pushing against a struggle. And we know from different examples throughout time that when people have pushed against struggles and when they have resisted against oppression of any kind, the outcome had not been for jail was death, right? And so these are some ways that we can think about why it's important to still seek the truth. So even with you all joining us today, and we appreciate you all being here, the information doesn't stop today after this hour is over. We still want you to seek information that is not nuanced, but that is actually rooted in humanity and justice and truth. Because the best way that you can educate yourself, you already know what I'm going to say, is by joining an organization that is working for justice and increasing your political education. Accessing information about the Black Liberation Army is not going to be an easy task, for one, because that information is not available, because that would actually provide people with the means and a way of understanding how to organize themselves. And the system does not want that. So we're going to have to work twice as hard to access that information. And it's going to be a challenge, but just imagine how much more beneficial it's going to be for Africans, for colonized people, for poor people, everywhere, if they had an opportunity to just reroute what their outcomes were, what their circumstances were, and if their class, if their race, if their gender, non-binary status, if it actually did not matter, but they all could just live in a world where they could be healthy and have livable wages and things like that, because we organized against these oppressions. Just imagine what that would do for humanity. Imagine how much of a difference that would make in the world. Imagine how we all would live a better life. A lot of us wouldn't be as sick as we are. A lot of us would be able to live longer lives because of that. Our children would actually be independent thinkers, and they wouldn't be cogs of the capitalist system, because even they would be taught differently and they would be upraised differently. And so just thinking more about why this truth is so important, right? To be able to find a social organization that is working for justice, right? With that emphasis on working for justice, because then if you have that emphasis on the justice part, then that means you understand that you have some truth that you need to seek, right? Because you know that the truth has been hidden from you, right? And so I think that just kind of understanding that a little bit, we can move back into the timeline of BLA and just understand that, BLA actually came and surfaced, if you will, in the early 1960s, so 1963. And then there was kind of this intersection, if you will, where the work of the groups such as the Black Panther Party, the Revolutionary Action Movement, the Republic of New Africa, along with FBI's counterintelligence program, they all led to the Black Liberation Army's action within the 70s as well as in the 80s. And so, again, just thinking about how it's important to have this background. Comrade Ajamu mentioned that the reason that we decided to do this seminar today was because he had access to this book because of some of these ancestors who had been a part of the Black Liberation Army, and they were starting to speak more candidly about what really happened. And so, like, again, this is where political education is so important and where it comes into play, because if you are in a position where you can access information that is based on truth, and that same information can then enhance the struggle for people who are definitely being treated unfairly, being dehumanized, being mistreated, whatever the case may be, why wouldn't we seek the truth? Why wouldn't we seek to have a better outcome? If we could change the conditions, if we could make things better for people, that's what we should be hoping to do. And that's what we can learn from our ancestors, because they did the same thing and they didn't tolerate a lot of the treatments that we are tolerating now, because I think people now are too busy feeling helpless and hopeless. And instead, if you were to study what has been done in the past, then you wouldn't necessarily feel that same hopelessness, because you would know that your ancestors didn't tolerate that, and they took action into their hands and found a way to change the circumstances. And so that same blood is coursing through all of our veins. Next slide, please. But it's going to be up to us to take the steps in terms of supporting that, and in terms of nourishing it and, fostering it. We're going to have to take responsibility for that. And so, we're in the month of August, you all. And so, again, if you have not joined an organization that's working for justice, maybe you can get some information more about the Black Liberation Army and consider what it looks like to make a decision within the next 2 weeks about just researching different organizations that you could be interested in. Maybe you're not ready to join right away, but you should at least be researching some of those that are impressive to you, because at least then you can start to learn more about what they're about, what their ideologies are, what they stand for. And maybe by the end of this year, you'll be able to make a commitment and go to a meeting, right? I think that, kind of setting those goals and making it, kind of chunking it to where it's more realistic and feasible. I think that's going to be really helpful as we move forward. And so we start with talking about our comrade Assata Shakur, formerly known as Joanne Chesmard. And although a member of the BPP for several months, the circumstances of our struggle led to, although a member of BPP for several months, not a high ranking member. And so circumstances of our struggle led to Assata Shakur becoming a pivotal leader within the Black Liberation Army. So it's important to note that even though Assata had position and membership within the Black Panther Party, not considered a high ranking member, but seriously became very pivotal within the Black Liberation Army. And even, with the liberation of being released from prison on November 2nd, we have 1979 where that happened, but the Black Liberation Army, as well as European comrades that we have done seminars about before, Assata has lived peacefully with the help of BLA and these European comrades since the release and liberation. And since 1984, lived peacefully in Havana, Cuba, and protected by socialist Cuba's revolution. And, I don't know if you all have read Assata's autobiography, but I would strongly encourage you all to pick it up. It's definitely one of those books where you might be able to read it at one point in your life, and then at another stage in your life where you've progressed and you have evolved as a person, you might pick it up and read it again, and it's going to hit you very differently. That's exactly what happened to me when I read it as a teenager. I was 16 when I read it, and then I read it more recently in my late 20s, and I received a lot of that information very, very differently, very, very differently. And so, again, like this notion of actively seeking information and the beauty that can come with that, the beauty of being able to search for information so that you can have access to it. We were talking about this yesterday in my work study circle, but the bottom line, you all, is that the oppressor works really hard and works overtime, if you will, to make sure that the information that we really need is hidden. They make it very, very difficult for us to access it and find it because, like I said, we're all just supposed to be cogs existing in this world. And if we were to think critically, if we were to fight back, if we were to push against systems, if we were to call things out, if we were to be honest about the realism of what's happening, then there would be bad reflections looking on us, in terms of us being considered to be ungrateful if we were to talk about the unethical work conditions at our job, for example. If we were to speak about the injustices that we're experiencing in the world, then it would be, well, what are you doing about it? And, well, you got to get out and vote because that's the best way to address this issue. And it's like, it's the same answers for the same problems. And to me, like, that's insanity, where you're expecting a different outcome, but you're doing the same exact notion, right? Or same exact action, expecting something different to come. And so, we've made it clear, we've done seminars on voting before. So we're not here to, pass judgment or share with you why you are making a bad decision if you choose to vote. But we have said in these seminars, we have a different philosophy on how we believe making change will take place. And the shortest way to summarize that seminar is to say that because we live in a system where money is more important than people, voting in an election, whether it's local, national, whatever, that is not going to change the circumstances that oppressed people are facing, colonized people, poor people are facing. It's not going to change those circumstances. It doesn't matter who's in office, if it's a blue office ruling, if it's a red, it doesn't matter, because the thing is, capitalism will always be the driving force for how the economy functions. And last time I checked, people didn't matter as it related to being above capitalism. Capitalism always matters more than people. And more importantly, making money always matters more than people. So no, we're not in a position where circumstances can change. We're not in a position where people can be valued. I was talking to my friend earlier today, and their mother-in-law is got a collapsed lung and basically has a terminal illness because the lung is not able to heal itself the way it needs to. And the provider was saying, well, we're glad you came in, and we'll be able to do some tests and things like that. But this is a working class indigenous person that has worked in construction their whole life. It's not like they have paid time off. It's not like they have good benefits with health insurance. They probably paid out of pocket to go to that visit. And when my friend shared this with me, I got so upset because I was just thinking about how that's everyone's story to some extent. Like, we're all kind of dealing with some type of health issue. And we can look at our individual behavior choices that we're making. If we choose to smoke, if we choose to drink, sure. But ultimately, it's not about us smoking. It's not about us drinking. It might not even be about us not getting enough sleep. Ultimately, it's about living in a system where we are insignificant. We don't matter, especially under capitalism, where we spend all our time working these jobs and then we get taxed beyond measure. So the check is not even as large as it needs to be. And now we're funding for Palestinians to suffer under a war that we don't even understand. The taxes from American dollars are funding for that. But it's all connected, and it's all designed for us to know nothing and for us to be in the dark, because ignorance is the beautiful thing under capitalism. If people are ignorant, they don't question stuff. If people are ignorant, they don't criticize stuff. If people are ignorant, you can continue to manipulate them. You can continue to abuse them. You can continue to exploit them and their resources, and they will never, ever question it. And if they don't question it, they're probably not going to push back against it. Right. And so that's extremely problematic, you all, because that means that if we're not questioning things, if we're not pushing back, if we're not thinking critically about things, then how are we going to change circumstances where we can actually get those livable wages, where we can actually be able to afford some type of healthcare that could actually make us feel valued as a human being? We're talking about giving our lives basically for working in these dead end jobs. And for what? Only to still die because we weren't able to save up enough money, because we weren't able to save up enough money to get the health care that we needed. And so I just think that, as unfortunate as that story is, it's not a siloed story. There are many like it in our communities, in our colonized communities, in our low-income, impoverished communities. Those stories are very, very familiar to a lot of our ears. And so this just makes me so upset, because this system is not a humane system. And so, like, again, just understanding, we're learning about these organizations so that we can collectively unite our organizational forces. That's really going to be important, you all. Otherwise, we're going to continue to just be dissipating off the planet of the earth, especially because capitalism is relying on individualism. It is relying on you to be self-centered. It is relying on you to be selfish and to put your needs first, because capitalism is selfish and it's going to put its needs before you. So it expects you to put your needs before others so that you can continue to perpetuate that. You can teach that to your children. You can teach that to your godchildren or your animals, whatever, right? But in actuality, we understand that individualism has never been the driving force for change to take place. When we think about all the work that our ancestors have done throughout the stage of time, it wasn't because they were individualistic, you all. It was because 9 times out of 10, they were organizing with organizations that were working for justice. And if they weren't in an organization, they were joining one right before they were killed. If they weren't in an organization, they were arrested right before they joined. But 9 times out of 10, it's always been that they were collectively working with another group of people, and they put their skills together. They put their skills in a unified way. And from there, they were able to organize. So as I prepare to pass this back to Comrade Ajamu, I strongly think we should put a timer on this, you all, because since January of this year, we've been encouraging you to join an organization working for justice. And even before then we have, but I'm saying specifically from January of this year, because we talked about it being a New Year's resolution. But this really is the time. It really, really is the time, because if you'll notice, We still have Africans that are being gunned down. We still have indigenous people that are being mistreated and assaulted. We still have Asian descent people that are mistreated and assaulted. We have non-male people that are mistreated and assaulted. Like, this is going to continue. Differently abled, our queer LGBTQ folks, it's not going to stop, you all. It is not going to stop. But if we organize ourselves and if we increase our political education, then we can start to train ourselves on how to physically deal with the physical violence that's coming towards us. And once we start organizing against it, it's not going to remain, because we're going to be fighting back. I mean, we already are fighting back, but a lot of us don't really have the notion to understand how to go about doing that. But if you join an organization that's working for justice, you all can incorporate that into your curriculum, into your physical education and your political education as well. So with that, I encourage you all to do some shopping. Just like you're interviewing for jobs, do some shopping and see what organizations you're interested in joining, and make a decision, set a timer that by December of 2024, you have gone to at least one meeting. Ashe.
Obrigada, Ashe. Thank you very much, Shakur. And I want to say the reason why we chose this topic for today, you all, is just not to have some kind of nostalgic reference to events of the past, but we want to break down the events that happened on November 2nd, 1979, to make a certain point to you. Because a lot of us believe that, well, the capitalist system is so strong, so powerful, there's nothing we can really do to change it. A lot of us believe that, whether we admit it or not. That's exactly what we believe. And so we want to use this example of the events on November 2nd, 1979, to illustrate what we can do when we put our minds to it, when we're organized. Because once we understand that there's no force on earth that can stop us once we're organized, then we won't have this sense of defeat that we walk around with every day. So, Shakur, when you say, you get upset about things, well, of course, we all do. But once we have a clear understanding of what we can accomplish and we believe it, then we will find that we look at these types of things a little differently. And instead of it just being a thing of why are they treating us like this, and I'm not saying that wasn't what you were saying, but it is what a lot of people are saying. Why do we have to go through this? Then instead of that, we can elevate to, okay, this is one more notch in the belt, one more round in the chamber, whatever way you want to look at it, to demonstrate that we need to organize and throw this system in the toilet where it properly belongs. I had a European piece of scum yesterday reach out to me, and he said, you're a thug. You belong in prison. And I wrote back to him, nobody cares about what you think with your miserable life. And I told him, sit your bum ass down. And it really didn't bother me that I get this feedback from these people all the time, but it really doesn't bother me because I know what we're capable of. And I would argue that he knows, and people like him know what we're capable of. That's why he's reaching out to me. I didn't reach out to him. I could give a damn what he thinks or does about anything. I would never reach out to somebody like him. They always reach out to me because they know what we can accomplish, even if we don't know. And so that's why we want to talk about what happened on November 2nd, 1979, to illustrate that. So when we say, what are the keys that were successful in bringing about this prison break of our sister Assata Shakur? And what's important is that, most of you know that on November 2nd, 1979, Assata Shakur was freed from the Clinton Correctional Facility on the east coast of the United Snakes of America in the New York state or New Jersey state. I can't remember which one offhand, but one of those two. And most of you know that. And even a good portion of you know that that effort to liberate Assata was carried out by people within the Black Liberation Army and some European comrades, many who had formerly been in the Weather Underground organization, like Marilyn Buck, who's on your screen there, Susan Rosenberg, those folks and had come together, David Gilbert, to form what was called the May 19th Committee in commemoration of the born days of El Haj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X, and Nguyen Ao Thach, Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the Vietnamese resistance, the Viet Minh Front that defeated U.S. imperialism in Vietnam. So they formed this committee commemorating the born days of those two comrades. And now we know, there's Lorraine Hansberry and Yuri Kuchiyama, two other people that we want to acknowledge having born days on May 19th. But back in that time, in the early 70s, they looked at those two folks, Malcolm and Ho Chi Minh, and created that committee. And most of us, some of us know that those are the people who did it. But I would argue that most, if not all of us, for the most part, or significantly, very few of us know or have studied what actually happened to lead up to November 2nd, 1979. So that's what we're going to get into right now. And the important thing we want to make sure is clearly stated is that it was not a spontaneous action to go into prison and burst out Assata Shakur. It was not just some people sitting around drinking beers one night and said, I'm bored as hell. What can we do? Well, let's go break somebody out of prison. It didn't happen like that. They planned this operation almost a year before they carried it out. About 9 months, they planned this. And the planning included a lot of work because the people who were leading up this effort, people like comrade brother Sekou Odinga, who's at the top of the page there, his picture. The Europeans approached Comrade Sekou. Comrade Sister Marilyn Buck approached Comrade Sekou and said, we want to be of service to the African liberation effort. Use us whatever way you see fit. Those are the exact words that Comrade Marilyn used when she was talking. And at first, the Africans were skeptical, like they didn't see where these Europeans could help them in anything they were doing. And, you have to study the work of the Black Liberation Army. They were not a reformist group. They weren't operating within the bourgeoisie Democratic Party here in the United States of America. They were building institutions like the acupuncture institution that was started by people, including our late comrade Black Liberation Army brother Mutulu Shakur, who some of you know is the stepfather of Tupac Shakur, the rapper and actor. And to fund the acupuncture clinic, the Black Liberation and other projects they were utilizing in the community, the Black Liberation Army carried out what they called expropriations. They robbed banks and they took that money and they funded the movement off of that. Now, so for some of you who are, basically slaves to the capitalist system, you think, oh my God, they were criminals. But we don't see how a colonized person taking back resources that were stolen from them by the capitalist system could ever be a criminal. We believe that it's the capitalist system that's the criminal, and that they were, as they stated, just expropriating those. Now, we could have a separate discussion about the strategic approach that they engaged in, the structural strength that they had available to them. Those are separate discussions, but we don't have any moral issue with them robbing banks. And the BLA carried out these operations a number of times. It wasn't until the last action they carried out in 1981, and that's another workshop we should do, which they did not carry out with the careful planning that they did the freeing of Sister Assata Shakur that ended up with people being hurt and killed. Up to that point, they had never had a problem expropriating money without anybody getting hurt and using that money for the movement. So they planned the effort to free Assata Shakur, and they were very deliberate. They wanted to do something that would give inspiration to the African liberation movement. And clearly they had a good idea what the hell they were thinking about, because almost 50 years later, the freeing of Assata Shakur continues to be a cause of inspiration. And the capitalists demonstrate that to us because Assata Shakur is a 70-something-year-old woman, and they got a $2 million bounty on their head, on her head, I'm sorry. Not because they feel like she's a threat to do anything at her age right now, but and not saying she couldn't, but that's not the reason why they have the $2 million bounty on their head, the largest bounty against an individual in United States history. That's not the reason why they just put that. They upped it from $1 million just a couple of years ago. And it's not because they fear that she's going to carry out any actions against the United States of America. They want to stunt the inspiration that she provides to you. There are people walking around here wearing shirts today that say Assata taught me, and they weren't even alive when Assata Shakur was rescued from that prison. But they are inspired by the example of a freedom fighter being liberated from U.S. capitalist prisons. And this was the vision of the Black Liberation Army comrades. And so when they carried out this 9-month plan and they interviewed people, and when Comrade Marilyn Buck came and said, hey, we can be of help, at first they were skeptical, but then she told them, we could be the face of your actions because they won't be looking for white women. And then they began to use that to strategize in some extremely creative and effective ways. And the work included securing cadre. They recruited cadre to carry this out. Matulu Shakur himself was supposed to be one of the people, but because of other work that was going on, was not able to do it. So they recruited other comrades. And they did that, and they created diversionary tactics, and they practiced, you all. They practiced carrying out the tactics. So Marilyn Buck was the driver. She was the one that drove the vehicle. And they were very tactical about it because it was 3 African men that went into the prison and left in the vehicle with Assata Shakur in the trunk. And the police had a partial description on the vehicle. And they knew it was 3 African men because they had signed in, they had seen them go into the prison. But when they saw a vehicle that met the description on the freeway, it was driven by a white woman, Marilyn Buck. They were not expecting that. And when they drove up beside her to analyze it closer, she began to flirt with them. And, you know, these people are not disciplined and committed to any morality or any higher level of principles. So they flirted back and then they drove off, leaving Assata Shakur in the trunk of that car. If they would have pulled the car over, they would have captured Sister Assata and she would have never made it, or at least not then she wouldn't have, to Havana, Cuba. So this only happened, you all, because of the organization of these comrades. That's the point I'm making. They didn't just wake up, go in the bathroom and defecate and then say, we're going to free somebody from prison. They planned this out 9 months in advance. They practiced it. All right, there's pictures on the screen. I mentioned comrade sister, Marilyn Buck. She was a European woman. She was my auntie. If you get mad at me calling her a sister, that's your goddamn problem. She did more for our people in the few years that she was active in the movement than you'll ever do your whole goddamn life. So she was my sister. So don't bring that nonsense to me. You'll get cussed out. She was my sister. She was my auntie. I had a relationship with her. I used to visit her in prison all the time. Used to take Shakur with me when she was young. And she was a wonderful woman and an inspiration to everybody that knew her. But she was there, and they carried out those activities. She's on the screen. Comrade Brother Sekou Odinga, who I just had the chance to meet in 2018. And I just told him how much I loved him and appreciated him. And I didn't know if he thought I was crazy because he didn't know me, but we just hugged and I started crying because I could never do anything to compensate for this African spending 33 years in prison, just like Marilyn, for carrying out this act. I could never do anything. I couldn't even think of what I could do to show my appreciation. But these people made this effort. Sister Nehanda Abedin there on the screen. They were all involved, and other people. These 3 are no longer physically with us, but they were all involved in planning and carrying out this action. And the message here is when we properly organize, there's nothing we cannot accomplish. And that, as I said before, is the sole reason why the imperialist system is so afraid of the legacy of Assata Shakur. That's why they're still trying to get this African woman in 2024. So in order to have that kind of discipline and commitment that these cadre, because clearly that action, it was led by the Black Liberation Army. As I told you, the other European comrades went to the BLA and asked them how they could be of service. Comrade Marilyn had spent years performing work to help the African liberation struggle. She went to prison in multiple times to do that. And she had escaped prison, just like Sekou Odinga. If you don't know these folks' stories, y'all got a lot of work to do. Sekou Odinga was one of the what they called the Panther 21, the people who were framed by the U.S. government and accused of plotting terrorist acts in 1969. There were a number of them. There was Zaid Shakur, who was killed in the car when they captured Assata Shakur on the New Jersey Turnpike. There were a number of them who were part of the Panther 21. Duraba bin Wahad, who is still here, still alive, still active, and still waging the good fight for our people's liberation. And he spent 19 years in prison behind the Panther 21 stuff. And Sekou Odinga was one of the Panther 21. Lumumba Shakur, who was Zaid's brother, was also. You should know about the Shakur family and their contribution to the new African independence movement. You should know all this. When I'm saying this, you should be, oh yeah, I know all about that. But most of us don't know anything about it. And you're not going to learn about it just sitting on TV watching LeBron James win Olympic gold medals. You're never going to know anything about it. You're never going to know about Twyman Myers, a 23-year-old African who struck such great fear in the hearts of imperialism that they machine gunned that young brother down on the streets of Brooklyn. They were so afraid of him, so afraid of him. And the only reason was that he was not afraid of them. And they knew that. So these were some of the cadre who were there. But the Panther 21, Sekou Odinga, had escaped from prison and ended up in Algeria with the the Black Panther Party International section, and then went to Tanzania and stayed there for a while, and then came back underground. So he and Marilyn were underground, and they did this work. But they understood they had to have necessary components to be successful. So, you know, what we want to do is take the individual courage and discipline of people like Sekou Odinga, Matulu Shakur, Nehanda Abdoinen, Marilyn Buck, Twyman Myers, etc., and replicate those values within our people on a mass level. That's what we want to do, because if we just have individuals, they'll kill them, they'll put them in prison, like they did all of these people, these wonderful human beings. But if we organize on a mass level, they can't kill all of us and they can't put all of us in prison. So their example, through their successful expropriation activities that I talked about, and Assata's being freed from prison, demonstrate what we can achieve if we're organized on a mass level. But that's going to take efforts to bring about that organization. So my big brother, Sekou Neblet, who's in Ghana, when I was at his house last in Tema, Ghana, in January of this year, he reminded me of the story he told me years ago when I was in Ghana with him. And he said when he was there in Guinea, Conakry, in the late 60s with Kwame Ture and the rest of them that were there. And at that time, Kwame Nkrumah was alive, and he was living in Guinea as a co-president for the Democratic Party of Guinea with Sekou Touré. And they came into Villa Sili, where Kwame Nkrumah lived. And Brother Sekou Neblet told me Kwame Touré and the other young Africans in their 20s, they had guns, you know, because they were training and they were working, you know, with the PDG, and they had, you know, some training as a result. So they had guns, and they ran into Nkrumah's place, and they told Kwame Nkrumah, "We're ready to go back and reclaim Ghana and reinsert you as president of Ghana." And Brother Sekou Neblet said, Kwame Nkrumah looked at them all there are about several of them, shook his head slowly and slowly grabbed the guns from each of them and handed them books instead. And he tells me the story like we bust up laughing at it. But the point that Nkrumah was making is that we have to, if we are prepared with all of the information we need, then we can create the organization to accomplish anything that we want to accomplish. That was Kwame Nkrumah's point. So if we have organized study, we call it work study, for example. That means there's two elements to it. There's the study, and then there's the work that you go out and do based on the study. Because Nkrumah was clear about this when he said that study without work is empty, and work without study is blind. He was clear about that. Study without work is empty, and work without study is blind. What he was saying is that if you're just out here every day, like most of us are, one day you're doing this, one day you're doing that, you don't have any vision about what you want to achieve, you don't have any context because you haven't studied anything, that's blind. And then you wonder why you can't make any progress. But then if you're just out here reading books individually and you're not doing any work, that's empty. You're not accomplishing anything. So we think Kwame Nkrumah was 100% correct there. We have to do both. We have to study and work. That's why we call our process work study. So we study Africa on the Move by Ancestor Shakur. We study Moses' Monotheism by Sigmund Freud. We read Angela Davis. I write books that we study. Other people write books. Kwame Nkrumah wrote a number of them. We read books about the ideas of Malcolm X. We read the ideas of Amilcar Cabral, of Secretary, of Thomas Sankara, of Mangaliso Sobukwe. We read Assata's autobiography, as Shakur mentioned. We read the autobiography of Kwame Ture, of Huey P. Newton. We read about Patrice Lumumba. We read about what happens in Sudan, in Eritrea, in the Congo. We read about Guinea and Ghana. We read about what happened in Haiti. We know what happened with the Duvaliers in Haiti and the Lavalas Party and the sabotage by U.S. imperialism. We understand, we learn about all that, we know it. So it gives us a vision for how we can be successful with all of these things and all of this work that we have to do. But if we don't know any of that stuff, how the hell can we have any kind of vision to do anything except decide, well, it's almost 6 o'clock. I'm gonna eat me some chicken. That's the only vision we have, because that's the only thing that we study to any degree. And that's why we can't move forward. So there are irrefutable facts that we have to understand that we cannot dismiss. Irrefutable facts. And one of those facts is that the Black Liberation Army proved that Huey P. Newton was 100% correct when he said the man's technology will never equal the will of the people. The man's technology will never equal the will of the people. The action to liberate Assata Shakur was carried out by 5 or 6 people, you all. All they did was study the prison. They understood the structure. They communicated with Assata several months before they liberated her. She wasn't surprised when they came. She knew they were coming. They planned it. They knew how they could do it. They knew if they got into a certain part of the prison, they would have free reign. They had practiced. They went into the prison. They did test runs, and they saw that the driver that drove the van, once they got in the waiting area, they weren't searching people. They saw that. So they knew they could get behind the wire into the prison without being searched, which showed them they could bring weapons in. So they did that. They didn't just do it on a whim. Well, I hope I can get in. If I don't, I'll just shoot like a cowboy. They didn't have that kind of backward-ass mentality. They knew, they were confident. By the time November 2nd, 1979 came around, they were confident that they could get in there and get to her without much resistance. And once they were able to get in and get through her, they knew that the people would note that it was 3 African men that came in there. So they knew that once they got her to the car and got her in the trunk, if they could do that without too many people seeing them, and then they could transition to Marilyn Buck driving the car, they knew they had a good chance to get away. And that's exactly what they did. But the organization, the planning, the vision is what gave them the confidence to be successful. So to this point, we've all had, or we have all these smaller groups and activities that happen. We have all these individual things that we do. They all have good intentions, but it's mostly disorganized. It mostly wasn't well thought out. It's just like one of the young new comrades in the APRP here was like, well, I think we should go talk to this person over here, who's involved with some mobilization work. And I told him, yeah, we can do that, but we need to sit down and talk about it first. Like, what are we going to talk to this person about? What's our end game? What do we want to accomplish? Like, I told him, like in APRP, we don't do anything like that. We don't just go and talk to somebody because that's how you get roped into other people's agendas. They have all the resources. They have all the, they're paid to sit there and do whatever they're doing, and you don't have a plan. That's how you get roped into other people's stuff. We're not doing that. I believe 100% in our vision and our work. So no disrespect to anybody else's work, but I don't want to do it for them. They're not doing my work for me. So we all can do all of our work, but I'm going to have a plan for everything I do, so that I don't get derailed, because I'm not that strong that I can, accomplish what I'm intending to accomplish if I don't have a clear vision of what I'm supposed to be doing. So that's how you do this. And most of us, we do nothing like that. We don't do school like that. We're not organized with it. We just kind of shuffle through it and hope for the best. We don't do relationships like that. We just kind of shuffle into them and hope for the best, and we wonder why they never work. We don't even do that when we have children. We just shuffle through it and we wonder why we have struggles with our children. We do it with our slaves in this capitalist system. We wonder why we have problems with that, because nothing we're doing is organized. That's a bad work to us because it requires work that we're not willing to do. We're not willing to put the work in. We just expect things to go a certain way just because we want them to go that way. And how has that worked out for you? So it's irrefutable. There's only one way that you can have this kind of success. It has to be organized. So these small group activities, all of this stuff is not going to get us where we need to be, plain and simple. And history demands that we recognize these realities for the well-being of future generations. We are irresponsible to keep just doing the same dumbass stuff over and over because our egos won't let us acknowledge that we don't know what the hell we're doing. And there are better ways to do things than what we're doing. And clearly that's true because what we're doing has not really produced any strong, tangible, positive results. So the lesson today, you all, is if we get in the mindset where we believe that we can create the capacity to win, then we can put the pieces together to build that capacity. And once we do that, these people have nothing that can stop us from accomplishing what we need to accomplish. But it will only happen with collective mass organization. That's the only way it'll happen. And if you don't believe in collective mass organization, then you don't believe that the people will ever be free. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. And you don't even have the skill level to recognize that Assata Shakur is still a major time. Every time that there's any kind of effort to have any discussion about quote unquote normalizing relationships between socialist Cuba and capitalist US empire, the US empire for the last 45 goddamn or 40 years has said one of the things that's going to be required to lift the 62-year economic blockade against socialist Cuba is you have to return, they call her Joanna Chesimard, her slave name, because they're not going to recognize our free African names. You have to return Assata Shakur to us. And every time for the last 40 years, whether it was Fidel Castro, Raul Castro, or whether it was our comrade brother who's president now in Cuba, they have always said the same thing. That is not on the table. But they are politically educated in Cuba. But you don't know that. You just know what CNN and Fox and CIA told you about Cuba, so you don't know that. They have strong political education, so they won't sell out Assata like you would. You'd sell her out in a minute. They won't do that. So this is what the reality is that we have to have that same level of commitment, and we can win. And this is why they're so upset with Assata Shakur, because we won. We got her out of prison. She's in a socialist country. She's thriving there. They can't get to her. The Cuban Revolution is organized to protect Sister Assata. They can't get to her. And they don't want us to see that, because that shows us that they have flaws in their armor. And if we recognize that, then we know that we can beat them, that they can be beaten. I remember in the Predator movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger, they found the blood of the Predator. And Arnold Schwarzenegger says, if it bleeds, we can kill it. Well, when we see that we can organize and liberate Assata Shakur, then we know that U.S. capitalism and imperialism can bleed, and that tells us we can kill it. And even if we are not intelligent enough in 2024 to recognize that, you better best believe that our enemies are. We thank you for joining us today. We want to invite you back next week. It has the wrong date. We apologize for that, but it's going to be August 11th, which is the commemoration. It's actually the 59th commemoration of the Watts Rebellion in LA. But we're going to talk about urban rebellions on a broader scale than just the US, on a worldwide basis, and their significance, why they're important, why we need to understand them, and understanding the difference between urban rebellions and revolution. So join us next week, August 11th. Wrong date there. Apologies for that. We also, right to the left of that on the screen, want to invite you, if you're in the Northern California area, on August 17th, the born day of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. We are having an event in person in McClatchy Park from 3 to 5 p.m. We will serve food. It's going to be Black August and Pan-African Women's Day commemoration, honoring those two institutions. So come on out. You look for the red, black, and green flag there. We want you definitely to come through for that, and go to aprp-intl.org. That event is up there as well on our APRP website. And the QR code in the upper left-hand corner, you can get other APRP programs other than this one, including this one. You can go to our Forward Ever shop, and please support African Revolutionary Organization, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, by buying clothes that have revolutionary slogans in us. You can support the party. You should go again to aprp-intl.org and join the APRP. You can support the APRP at Venmo at A-APRP and at PayPal at AAPRP, no dashes. Burkina Books on the bottom right. Become a sponsor, one of our projects on the ground in Burkina Faso. Please do that. And please continue to tell people about my book and buy copies, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. I'm doing a number of trainings in the next few weeks about how to properly prepare to fight against white supremacists. I fund that work that I do as a member of the APRP with whatever little proceeds I get from the sales of this book. So go to ratchetyass.amazon.com, type in the title of the book and or my name, and please buy a copy. And don't come back with that weak, well, I don't do Amazon, when you just put gas in your car from Shell and you just paid PG&E for your electricity. Like, look, we are using the tools of capitalism to overthrow it. So help us do that, okay? And anyone who's doing this work understands that, right? So help us do it, because that's how we do it. So we thank you for joining us today. Again, we want to invite you back next week. We hope you have a great rest of your evening, and stay strong. Organization is the weapon of the oppressed.